Hi, this is a Yesterday's Moose production, and today I'm going to be playing Namco Museum 50th Anniversary Collection for PlayStation 2. This video is in response to Namco Museum being released on the Nintendo Switch and will be divided into two parts, featuring 8 games each. The games that I will be playing are Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, Mappy, Galaxian, Galaga, Dragon Spirit, Dig Dug, and Bosconian. While I'm playing these games, I'll also be letting you know some facts about the game in Let's Play and Learn. Let's start with Pac-Man. The ghosts in this game are called Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde. Pac-Man was first released in Japan in 1980. The original title was PacMan, inspired by the Japanese onomatopoeic phrase Paku Paku Taberu, where Paku Paku describes the sound of the mouth moving, opening and closing in rapid succession. It was created by Japanese video game designer Toru Iwatani. Pac-Man also had an animated series and is among the most famous video games of all time. It is also one of the highest grossing video games of all time, having generated more than $2.5 billion in quarters by the 1990s. Pac-Man has appeared in more than 30 officially licensed game spin-offs, and Pac-Man is one of the longest running video game franchises from the golden age of video games. It is part of the collection in the Smithsonian Institute and New York's Museum of Modern Art. It's also known for the notorious kill screen at level 256. A man by the name of David Race, who in 2013 attained the maximum score possible of 300,333,360 points in 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 49 seconds. One of the famous stories about this game is that Iwatani reported that the character's shape was inspired by a pizza with a slice missing, although he admitted in 1986 in an interview that this was only half true because it somewhat came by simplifying and rounding out the Japanese character for mouth, Kuchi. Famously, the game was also named Pac-Man as a reference to Pac-Man's hockey puck shape. The name was changed in an effort to avoid vandalism from people changing the P to an F. Pac-Man was the first gaming mascot, and the game was also designed to appeal to a female demographic with amazing success. And at this point, I just got hit by a ghost. Oh no. The ghosts also had different names in Japanese. Blinky was Akebe, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Pinky was Pinky. Inky is Aosuke. And Clyde was Guzuta. And at this point, I am just going to talk over what I'm doing right now, which is trying to collect dots, of course. And I do like to try to stick to the corners and get the power pellet to get the ghosts. It's part of the strategy whereby I try to get the power pellet and then clear as many dots around the area as I possibly can while the ghosts are blue. And it's kind of harder to get the dots in the middle section And one thing about Pac-Man is I remember playing it in a old pizza place, ironically enough. Or interestingly enough, I should say. And I was never very good at it. I actually like Ms. Pac-Man a little bit more because it has more colors and more variety. And I was slightly better at that game. But going through this again, I do still really like Pac-Man. I think it still holds up as a video game. It's not a lot of bells and whistles, but you know, you go around a maze, you collect dots, you avoid ghosts, unlike what I just did there, and you try to get the maximum score. There's going to be no way, shape, or form that I will ever come close to getting the maximum score. The only game that I've ever played extremely well as far as arcade games go is Mania, which was also known as Exciting Hour, which is a old school arcade wrestling game. That game I have actually scored unofficially. I have beaten the third place world record score. So if for some reason I ever were to try that again, I'd try to get a higher score, possibly record myself playing, and actually submit it. And maybe I'd actually have a world record. I'm not exactly sure what the rules are about that. But anyways, back to Pac-Man. And I just lost. Okay. With that, going to go on to Ms. Pac-Man, which I like a little bit more, like I was saying. And Ms. Pac-Man was released in January of 1982 and is one of the most popular arcade video games of all time. Ms. Pac-Man became the most successful American-produced arcade game, selling 115,000 arcade cabinets. According to one estimate, a majority of Pac-Man players were women. Shortly before release, it was stated that Ms. Pac-Man was conceived in response to the original Pac-Man. And I didn't know this until I was looking it up, but this was not an official game. It was originally basically people just making a game out of Ms. Pac-Man and not getting permission from Namco to do it, which eventually led to a legal battle concerning the royalties for the game, and then the game was, the rights were eventually turned over to Namco. Also, this game has been ported to countless computer systems and other gaming computers, gaming consoles, and other gaming devices, such as the Atari 2600, Atari 5200, the 7800, Atari 8-bit, Commodore VIC-20, the Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, IBM PC, Apple II, TI-99, NES, Sega Master System, Mega Drive, Genesis, Super Nintendo, CDI, Game Boy Color, PlayStation 2 and 3, Xbox, and Xbox 360, iPhone, Windows, and many, many, many more. Another thing I like about Ms. Pac-Man is that the fruits travel around the game board so that you have to kind of chase them down. I do like that aspect. Even though in Pac-Man they stay in one spot, which I guess makes it a little bit easier. I like the fact that the fruit just kind of randomly show up and move around the board. Again, with this game, I try the strategy of sticking to the edges where the power pellets are. So basically, it's like try to clear out the middle as much as possible, then go to the corners and utilize the power pellets to, basically get them when the ghosts get close by, and then you can basically eat the ghosts, of course, and I don't know if it gets a high score doing it that way, but that's the way that I play it. And I mentioned this, but I like how there's more variety in Miss Pac-Man. I like that the game boards change from one game board to another. So you have slightly different mazes. And there I just unfortunately died. It's kind of hard to get to this maze, for me at least in particular, is that have to basically work hard to get past the first maze and then on to this one. I also like the cutscenes that they play between rounds. I think to me that makes them a little bit more interesting. And I can't recall if I mentioned it or not, but I'll mention it again or for the first time, that Pac-Man also had a cartoon series. I kind of remember watching it when I was a kid. I guess like the plot of every episode was that Pac-Man was chasing after the ghosts. And there's also like a song called Pac-Man Fever that was very popular at the time that it came out. And even like nowadays, I think, Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man are like the most recognizable characters, definitely up there with like Donkey Kong and Super Mario. Oh, and unfortunately I just lost. Okay, on to Mappy. Don't have too much information about Mappy. However, we get this little bit of an introduction here where it shows some information about the game before it starts. What points you get and what the enemy names are and things like that. Mappy was released in 1983, and apparently, according to the internet, the name Mappy was likely derived from Mappo, the Japanese slightly pejorative slang for a policeman. And the enemy cats were called Meowkeys, or in Japan, Mewkeys. That's kind of cute. In 1986, a console-only sequel was released in the US called Mappyland. Japan-only arcade sequels came out. One called Hopping Mappy and Mappy Kids in 1989 for Famicom. And in 2002, it was released as a pachinko called Mappy Park. I've never been terribly good at this game, and you might have noticed that I have a lot of extra lives. I forgot to put it on the default settings, so I think I have 5 lives, which, normally if you played this in the arcade, you would not have that many lives, definitely. And even still, I don't do terribly well. I think I only get past maybe 2 mansions. I guess that's what you're supposed to be in. Or giant houses. I don't know. It's kind of funny that you're a mouse policeman and, being chased by cats. And when this game originally came out, for some reason I thought that the mouse was the creature doing the robbing, because you have to go after all these treasures and whatnot. Of course, now that I'm older, I realize that you're just recovering these items. And I just got taken out again. This game has like a weird mechanic, you know, where you have to jump on trampolines and whatnot. And as long as you're traveling through the air, you're basically invincible. But I don't know. This game to me is pretty hard. I do vaguely like remember it in one of the bigger arcades. I think that's where I played it. And I'm not doing terribly well. Run, 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 mousey, run. Go, go, go. Get the thing. Up there. I think it's a computer. And you know those computers were worth a lot back in the day. And here we have the bonus stage, where I guess you have to collect these balloons. Unfortunately, I don't do very well. And the app ended up falling there. It's a weird bonus level. I don't know if I've ever made it to there before. I find it rather difficult. Oh no, just got taken out again. Onto the last life. It's funny, those special doors that open up and like send out a sound wave that takes out all the bad guys. Oh, there we go. Unfortunately, that's the last life. So on to the next game. This game is Galaxian, and there's a bit of information that comes up. I don't really like how in this collection that you have that big bar on the bottom that says 1 player start and 2 player start. Would be nice if that information wasn't there blocking what was on the screen. Also, this game, I find it pretty hard, at least as compared to the sequel, Galaga. Galaxian was released in 1979. It was designed to compete with Taito Corporation's successful game, Space Invaders. And that's really, really obvious that they are trying to capitalize on that sweet, sweet Space Invaders moolah. Or at least they're trying to get them money. Galaxian added an element of, like an interesting element by having the aliens periodically make kamikaze-like dives at the player. Apparently the spaceship is called Galaxip. Weird name. But hey, this was the late 70s. Everything was weird, especially video games. Apparently, this made it the first game to feature enemies with individual personalities. Galaxian was one of the most pirated motherboards during the early 80s, which I guess is true again because Space Invaders was ridiculously popular, so everybody and their uncle's brother's former roommate were trying to make games that looked or acted or sounded like Space Invaders. I also find when I play this game that the hit detection is not the best. I don't know if that's a result of the emulation or if it's just something that's an aspect of the game itself, but I've had deaths in this game where apparently I haven't been hit by anything at all, and for whatever reason the spaceship blows up. There we go, that's it. That's my last life. So on to the next game eventually. I'm not sure why I stayed on this game over so long. There we go. On to Galaga, which I like a lot more. Galaga is probably one of my favorite old school games. I'm, excuse me, moderately good at it. And I can sometimes get to, say, round 10 or something like that if I, really get on a roll. I think Galaga is pretty notable for its colors and the sound effects and stuff like that. You can also shoot twice in a row, unlike Galaxian, where you can only shoot one shot at a time. And Galaga was released in 1981. And apparently there's a bug that can cause attackers, like the spaceships, to randomly stop firing at the player, which would be nice. I wouldn't mind knowing what that bug is. I don't know what the bug is. It also has, similar to Pac-Man, it also has a bug where when you get to stage 256, you have a weird bug that happens. And depending on the difficulty setting of the machine, it can cause it to basically freeze up, and you have to reset the game. And the world record highest score for Galaga was set in June of 1989 by Stephen Krogman. And he scored 15,999,990 points. And Galaga also appeared in War Games from 1983, the movie War Games, The Karate Kid in 1984, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in 1987, the terrible, horrible movie Pixels in 2015. It was also, I recall, it was in one of the Avengers movies where Tony Stark points out that one of the technicians is playing Galaga on the computer. At this point, I'm doing pretty well in the game. I like having two spaceships. Eventually, I'm going to lose a spaceship, right? Yep, right there. Just as I said it. And then I get taken out by the other Galaga? Whatever those enemies are called. Actually, in Galaxian, I guess the player is the Galaxian, so are we the Galaga? That I'm not too sure of. Difficulty of the game definitely gets more harder. Yeah, that's great English. It gets more difficult as it progresses, and on the challenge stages, I am not doing fairly well either. And I'm also trying to avoid being taken by the spaceships there. I don't want them to steal one of my ships. If I were to get an extra life, I would probably allow them to take me, and then I could have two shooting spaceships again. But at this point, it's a little bit more risky to let them do that. Here we are, on to another challenge stage. I'm totally missing all of these bad guys. That's what I'll call them, bad guys. Let's see, how well did I do? Not super good. Oh well. You know what's really sad is I actually saw the movie Pixels in the theater. Shame on me. I should not have supported that movie. But for some reason it suckered me in. So if you haven't seen it, don't. It is not worth it. I would recommend watching any of those other movies, like War Games, Karate Kid, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. All of those are good movies. And I have seen all of them. It's been a while since I watched War Games. Just seem to remember that Matthew Broderick was in it. And he basically defeats the computer by getting it to play tic-tac-toe with itself. Because tic-tac-toe is one of those games which, if you play it correctly, can never ever be won. You can always finish the game in a tie. Getting harder to hit these guys now. They're definitely moving around a lot more. Here we are on to stage 10. It's really heating up now. Oh, that was unfortunate. There are my statistics. Get to see how good or bad I am at the game. And hey, I get to enter some initials. So I'll go ahead and put some initials that are not mine. And then we'll go on to the next game. Just call me Zod. Here we are with Dragon Spirit. A game that I vaguely remember in the arcade. If I did play it in the arcade, it wasn't too often because it's kind of hard. And Dragon Spirit was released in 1987. And the story, which it doesn't really fully explain, is apparently in the kingdom of Midgult, a serpent demon named Zawel escapes imprisonment after 1,000 years and kidnaps Princess Alicia. What a surprise. Always with the taking and kidnapping of princesses. That's what it's all about. Anyways, a soldier named Amal is chosen to rescue her and destroy Zawel. He points his sword towards the sky and transforms into a powerful blue dragon. Yep. Sounds believable. Until recently, my online username was Blue Dragon. Although it really had nothing to do with this game. It had more to do with ghouls and ghosts, because in that game there's a blue dragon. But maybe that's a common thing in video games. Apparently there was a sequel called Dragon Saber, which was released in 1990 and allowed 2 players to play simultaneously. And Dragon Spirit was also released for the PC Engine, also known as the TurboGrafx 16, in 1988. And what's interesting about that is when I found out that information, I actually looked it up, and apparently the TurboGrafx 16, or the PC Engine, as it was known in Japan, apparently it came out before the Mega Drive. That's weird. I thought it came out afterwards. But it was actually that the TurboGrafx 16 had come out afterwards, if I remember correctly. It really doesn't matter because at the time the Genesis, aka Mega Drive, was doing very well, and TurboGrafx 16, aka PC Engine, never really caught on. It was only until the Super Nintendo, otherwise known as the Super Famicom, it was only until that came out that Sega really had any competition. Which was interesting because the Sega Master System really didn't do well in North America, apparently. And here I'm taking on the giant sea serpent. Maybe it's the Loch Ness Monster. And unfortunately I die. Which is pretty sad. However, I have one more life to try to take out this giant sea serpent. Shoot it in the head, shoot it in the head, take it out. I find that the controls in this game are a little bit slow. It does make reacting to things a little bit more difficult. And since the dragon that you're controlling is so big on the screen, it makes it even harder to avoid stuff. And if it's not really evident, I think I mentioned it already, this game is hard. It is a difficult game. And in this version, for some reason, the ability to continue is not included. Apparently, you can continue in this game, but for whatever reason, in this version, you can't, which is really weird. I don't know why they wouldn't include that feature. Anyways, I'll go ahead and put in some initials, and then on to the next game, which is Dig Dug. Yes. Can you dig it? Yes, and I can also dug it too. Like this little introduction here where it introduces the enemies that you'll be facing. There's a Puka and a Figar, which the Puka was like based on a tomato, I guess, and the Figar is just like a green dragon. I'm not particularly good at this game, but I do pretty much okay. And Dig Dug was released in 1982. I do remember playing this in the arcades back in the day. I also remember not too long, well, back in the year 2000. In the year 2000. Anyways, back then I went to an arcade and I went and played Dig Dug, whereas other people were playing a lot more modern games. And one of the guys who was working at the arcade came over to me and said, "Why are you playing this?" And I said, "Well, I like it." I like Dig Dug. Meanwhile, it was only $0.25, whereas the other games were like $1. Some of them even more than that, which was, in my opinion, kind of ridiculous. Apparently, this game also has a kill screen at round 256. And although the character's name is Dig Dug, he also goes by the name of Hori Taizo. And the name of the game is also a pun of the Japanese phrase Hori Taizo, which means I want to dig. In 1985, Dig Dug 2 was released, but not as successful. another sequel, Dig and Strike, was released in 2005 for the Nintendo DS, and a 3D remake of the original called Dig Dug Deeper was released for the PC in 2001. And the characters Puka and Fygar also appeared in the Disney film Wreck-It Ralph. And I've seen that movie, and I don't particularly remember seeing those characters, but hey, I'll believe anything that's on the internet. Nah, that's not a real thing. I don't really believe everything that's on the internet. In fact, I'm kind of a skeptical person when it comes to stuff on the internet. But this information about video games, I kind of believe it. Because why would anybody make that up, right? I also believe that you get more points by dropping rocks on the enemies. Oh, and I just unfortunately got taken out. There were two enemies on top of each other and couldn't tell. It's kind of a cheesy death, unfortunately. But as I was saying, is that you get more points, I believe, if you drop the rocks on the enemies. It's a little bit harder to do, though. I am doing fairly well, all things considered. You also get points for just digging, which is kind of cool. I didn't really know that until I started looking up the information about the game. Then, of course, when I watched my score while I was playing, I did notice that it was going up. And always, like, when at the end of the round and there's only one enemy left, that enemy always tries to get away. And again, I was suckered into a situation where there were two enemies on top of one another. And it definitely didn't look like that. Take that rock. Get both of you at the same time. Ha ha ha. Two tomatoes with one rock. That's what it's all about. And unfortunately I die trying to get that green pepper in the middle of the screen, which is unfortunate. And hey, I get to put in some initials. Not my initials, but their initials. Bad. And here's the last game that I'll be playing for today. Bosconian, which is of course a space shooter. Because space shooters were really, really popular back in the day. Not so much now. And it also shows a score table where it shows the different amount of points that you get for the things that you will find during the game. However, that banner at the bottom is still blocking off some of the information, so I have no idea what those things are down there. Cannot read it at all. And the basic objective is to get rid of these bases, because all your base belong to us, or something like that. Go ahead and get it started. This game kind of reminds me of Sinistar, which is a fun game, which I'll probably eventually do a Let's Play of, because I like that game. Bosconian was released in 1981. The sequel game, Blast-Off, was released in 1989 in Japan only. The digitized voice that goes on in the game says things like blast off, alert, alert, battle stations, spy ship sighted, and condition red. Kind of hard to tell that is what it's saying when you're actually playing the game, though. Bosconian also has the weird glitch in round 256, where things start to get funny. It doesn't kill the game, though. You can still continue After 255, it goes to round 0, and then if you pass round 0, it'll go to round 1 again, as if, as if you're starting a new game. In 1982, Bosconian won the Arcade Award for Best Science Fiction Fantasy Coin-Up Game. Oh, well, it won the 1982 award. It won it in 1983. I don't know how that makes sense, but it won an award. Congratulations. It was also apparently the first game to feature a continuation screen with a timer after the end of the game. There were other games that preceded it, or at least one game that preceded it where you could continue, but it didn't have a timer. And it would just be for specific rounds in the game rather than continuing where you left off. And at this point, basically I'm just trying to take out all of these bases. And I'm doing okay with it, but this is my last life. Oh, and no, I have one more life. I don't know why I thought that was my last life, but I don't know. Looked like my last life. I'm trying to take out these bases again. I find that the AI for the enemies is a little tricky because they will definitely smash into you like that. And hey, I got 30,920 points. Yay me. And with that, I'll go ahead and just put in a name again. I will put in Zod. Kneel before Zod. And that's it. That was Namco 50th anniversary. This was part 1. Go ahead and continue with part 2 next time. So thank you very much for watching. This has been a Yesterday's Moose production, and I'll see you next time.